Hey, it's Lara here. It is Wednesday, September 30th. Welcome to Witchy Wednesday, your weekly astrology forecast. So this one's for the week of September 30th to October 6th, 2020. And this is an intense month, right? October begins and ends with a full moon. And sandwiched in between is a new moon, an intense new moon in Libra, and then there are a bunch of other significant things happening. So, we've got some intensity, and I know it might seem like things can't get any more intense, but October may beg to differ. But the thing is, and I hesitate to say this because of something in particular that I'll share with you in a sec, but for the most part, I think that it's not, in many ways, entirely new to us, right? The energy that we're experiencing and we will experience on October. Although there may be some surprises in store because for a few different reasons, Uranus and Mercury are opposing each other, but there are going to be at least some things that, are kind of like maybe we're starting to get used to, like maybe, this, the whole COVID situation. Although we may see that being amped up in some ways as well, but it's not like when COVID, kind of just hit earlier in the year and we were all scrambling and, trying to kind of come to terms with what was going on. And now we're a little bit more experienced with that, right? So, but there may be some surprises as well. It's, I guess it remains to be seen, but nevertheless, it's an intense month shaping up. And right out of the gate, we have a full moon in Aries, which is happening tomorrow, which is what we're going to spend the majority of time talking about in this video. And my voice is getting a little hoarse. This is take 3. And it's, no surprise to me that Mercury is in the shadow zone right now. I'm going to station retrograde in a bit in Scorpio, which happens to be my 3rd house, right? Which, among other things, deals with communications and sometimes like technical glitches and things like that. And it tends to be the case with Mercury retro. Mercury rules my chart because I'm a Virgo rising. But also when Mercury particularly is in Scorpio, this tends to be the case. And, also, I'm super exhausted, full disclosure. I did not sleep well. I haven't been sleeping well. I've been up since the middle of the night. And that often happens around the time of a full moon. In general, people tend to need less sleep around the time, when the moon's more full, and more sleep in the dark moon phase. So that's kind of normal in a sense, but also I'm somebody who the lead up to the full moon is usually more intense than the actual event for me. And then, truth be told, it's just I've had a lot of personal interactions with the intense energies, right? Mars and Aries. I have a whole lot of planets in Aries in my 8th house, which is intense to begin with. And then that's all being triggered by what's going on in Capricorn. So super fun times around here, and in many ways, and I'm sure many of you can relate. These energies of 2020 in particular are affecting all of us in some way. Some of us more personally than others, right? And particularly if you're somebody that has a lot of energy or significant, planet or point in the cardinal signs, specifically Capricorn, Aries, Libra, and Cancer as well, then you're being personally kind of triggered, right? So bear with me if I'm a little my voice is a little scratchy and I'm a little bit spacey. I apologize for that, but we'll try to get through it here. Third time's a charm, right? So as I was saying, October begins and ends with a full moon. And right now, the moon is in Pisces. So that is, that is an emotional energy to begin with, moon in Pisces. Pisces is so sensitive. And so our emotions can be very much at the surface, right? With when the moon is in that sensitive water sign. And then we're going from these watery sensitive emotions to the fiery Aries emotions of the full moon, right? So it can be a few intense days. And then the moon will move into Taurus on Saturday, which may give us all a bit of a breather and, well, potentially. And then Gemini on Tuesday. So if you're somebody who's curious about learning how to work with the energy of the moon and how you're sort of responding to the energy when the moon is in specific signs and that kind of thing, then please go grab my free guide to working with the moon that I have over on my website, and the link to that is below. What else do I want to say here before I dive into the specifics of the full moon? Well, we have Mercury in Scorpio now. I kind of touched on that because talking about my own technical issues. Mercury entered Scorpio on Sunday, the 27th, and it's in its retrograde shadow. It will retrograde, I can't remember the date, and of course I didn't write it down, but soon. And, it's going to retrograde in Scorpio, move back into Libra to about 25 degrees, and then, move back and move through Scorpio, all the way through Scorpio again. So when Mercury's in Scorpio, Mercury, the planet of our thinking, our communications, our mobility, that kind of thing, is very much a sort of this like go deep or go home energy, right? And it becomes very probing, and our communications and our thought processes and that sort of thing can become more intense when Mercury's in Scorpio. And it's like this journey, in a way, journey to the underworld, right? Mercury was the guide of souls, the psychopomp, who was able to slip between the worlds. And so when Mercury goes into Scorpio, it's like we're diving into the underworld, and we may uncover some things. There may be some intense communications. There may be secrets revealed, information that comes out, when this is the case. Things buried in the underworld tend to be probed at when Mercury is in Scorpio. And so, that's something that we are dealing with right now, and we'll continue to deal with for a bit. And then we also had just yesterday, the 29th of September, Saturn station direct, right? And that coincided with a square between Mars and Saturn, an exact square. Mars and Saturn have been in square, like in proximity to each other for a while. They had their first exact square in August 24th. Mars in Aries and Saturn in Capricorn, both in their home signs, right? So at their greatest kind of strength. And then we had the exact square yesterday. It's still exact today as I'm recording this. And then the last exact square will be the 13th of January. So we've got this, Mars Saturn story playing out, and it's kind of reached a bit of a crescendo. The middle square, interesting that it coincided with the the first US presidential debate, which I will admittedly tell you that I couldn't bring myself to watch. But by all accounts, it was interesting. It was quite a spectacle. So anyway, but that Mars-Saturn energy is this like, right? It's like Clash of the Titans in a sense. Saturn is putting up boundaries and saying, talk to the hand, and, really, Saturn is this strict taskmaster teacher. Saturn is the Lord of Karma, right? The one who keeps track and doles out the rewards accordingly, and wants us to not take shortcuts and that sort of thing. And then Mars, like Saturn's this sort of wise old teacher, and then Mars is this young warrior who just wants to go for it. Mars is in retrograde right now, so already kind of frustrated, right? Because being held back a little bit. And Mars is this warrior-like energy and wants to, go when Saturn's putting up the blockade kind of thing. And so that's where we're at. It can feel quite combustible, this energy, quite frustrating. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when I talk about the full moon, but just one or two other things first. We have the good news about the Saturn Direct. Let's talk about that, because who doesn't need some good news right now? Saturn stationing direct means that Saturn is finally making its way out of Capricorn. And so, it's like, don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out, Saturn. Hope you didn't hear me say that. But anyways, that's kind of how it feels right now. I think we're all at this point where it's like, come on already. And the thing is that's not to say, we're not going to continue to have challenges. I've said this before. I'll say it again. It's worth repeating. When the ball drops on New Year's Eve, 2020, it doesn't mean that everything, the fairy godmother swoops in and it's sunshine and unicorns, right? No. We will have different challenges over the course of the next year and more, but there are different challenges, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And so Saturn, over the next couple of months will be making its way out of Capricorn. And in fact, on December 17th, he will enter Aquarius officially, which is a sign he also rules traditionally. In modern astrology, Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, but Saturn, before Uranus was discovered, ruled Aquarius as well as Capricorn. So Saturn has an affinity for Aquarius as well, right? So we may see a continuation of the themes, but in a different way. Aquarius and Capricorn, are very different from each other. There may be some kind of similarity in the sense, because they are both traditionally ruled by Saturn, but different energies. So that's happening on later on in the year, on the 17th, and then Jupiter will follow a couple days later, and then they'll have their great conjunction right on the solstice, December 21st in Aquarius. So that's something to keep our eyes on, and see sort of like what's in store, right? What's in store for the future. But like I said, the good news is we're going to get a change in energy, and when a planet stations, the energy is amplified, but then when it stations from retrograde to direct, it's like this forward momentum starts to pick up, and the energy, a few things can happen. It's like it goes from being more internalized to more externalized. So we see the themes on a more kind of a practical material realm, or reversals can happen, right? In traditional astrology, retrogrades tend to denote reversals, and so that can be the case as well. But that energy is starting to move forward, so that's good. And on that note, Pluto is following suit, right? Pluto also in Capricorn, and stationing direct on Sunday, October 4th. So that'll be another forward, hit of forward momentum in a sense. And then, Pluto's still in Capricorn until 2024. So he's not quite done with Capricorn yet. But the intensity of the conjunctions with Saturn and Jupiter will dissipate. What else? What else do I want to say? I think I want to show you the chart and then talk about the full moon specifically. So here we have the moon in Libra, right at 9 degrees at the time of the full moon, which is 5:05 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, October 1st. And then across the sky is the sun in Libra. Full moon is always the sun and the moon opposite each other, right? There's that tension. And the full moon is conjunct. It's within a couple degrees of Chiron, the wounded healer archetype. So that plays a role in this lunation. And then At the same time, we still have Mars and Saturn in square to each other. Mars in Aries, Saturn in Capricorn, right? Saturn has station direct already. Pluto is going to station direct on October 4th. And then we have Jupiter and Pallas Athena still there. And so the other thing, as the moon moves through Aries over the course of the month, she will trigger by square aspect, right? These energies, but she will also trigger by conjunction Eris, Mars, and Lilith. All very intense energies, warrior-like energies. And we have, Eris also, these planets are squaring, right? So this cardinal square, it's quite intense. So and there's Mercury in Scorpio, as I mentioned. So, who's going to oppose Uranus. So that may be surprises, as I mentioned. So, okay, that's the chart. What I want you to do is think back 6 months to around March 24th, when we had the new moon in Aries. And whatever began around that time, right, whatever was initiated at a new moon in Aries, is now reaching the culmination point, the crescendo. Sometimes a crisis, is a full moon. A release, it's like the pressure cooker release valve goes off. Some kind of something coming to a close, an ending. And sometimes, we just experience that as like an emotional release. The moon rules our emotions. And so, our emotions tend to be quite at the surface at the time of a full moon. And then because we've got this fiery Aries energy, and then the moon's being triggered by Chiron, it can be quite emotionally intense. And what I want to say about that conjunction to Chiron is that, in mythology, I'm not going to go into a big Chiron lesson here. I have actually a couple of videos on my site about Chiron. And so you can watch those if you want. But Chiron is archetypally associated with the wounded healer archetype. And if you want to learn more about that, just very recently, a couple of weeks ago, I think Chris Brennan did an astrology podcast episode with Melanie Reinhardt, who is one of the, if not the foremost, experts on Chiron and the centaurs. And so it was a really good interview. And so you can watch that if you want. Google the astrology podcast. But anyway, Chiron, this wounded healer archetype, right, is very much in Aries, triggering this wounding of the identity, right? So we're all, as Chiron moves through Aries, and when Chiron moves through Aries, it takes roughly about 8 years. And this process began, I can't remember when exactly, but it's been about 1.5 years or so now. We're into the process of Chiron through Aries, but it triggers us to pay attention to this, and it kind of forces us to deal with this notion of, the wounding of our identity. And it's like, a Chiron in Aries wound is very much, it's this kind of primal, like, do I even have a right to exist kind of energy? Who am I in relation to the whole? This sort of thing. And so at the full moon, because of Chiron in close proximity to the moon in Aries, we can experience like a reactivation of an old wound, salt being rubbed in the wound a little bit. And so that can be uncomfortable, right? But take it as an opportunity to do some, to harness the courage of Aries, of Mars, of also Lilith and Eris there in Aries, right? This warrior-like energy, harness that courage to move through the wound, to deal with it. Things like fears about things can come to the surface. Anxieties are just wounds, can come up around this time. And so be gentle with yourself, as we go through this lunation. And trying to think if there's anything else I really want to say about that. What I think I want to mention next, well, I did mention, is that, the moon is going to trigger as she moves through Aries. She's going to, of course, trigger the square to Saturn, or Saturn, Pluto, all the planets in Capricorn, but also trigger by conjunction Eris and Mars and Lilith, right? And so Eris and Lilith are both these energies of the wild feminine, the feminine sort of scorned, the kind of mad as hell, not going to take it anymore, kind of primal feminine energy, right? It's the counterpart to Mars energy. And in fact, in mythology, Eris was referred to sometimes as a sister of Aries, of Mars. And so she was his companion in battle, right? And that kind of thing. And so she's the feminine counterpart there. And also, incidentally, Mars had he had twins named Deimos and Phobos, right? So that translates to terror and fear. And it's interesting because I think Mars has the capacity to birth those things, and we have to be really mindful of how we respond, right, to this Mars energy, and whether we choose to do that in a more shadow way, more sort of aggressive and impulsive and unbridled sort of passion, kind of trampling over anybody that's in our way to get what we want, very self-focused, this kind of thing, or a conscious way, if you will, asserting yourself if that's not something that you're used to doing, being more active potentially in some way, speaking your mind, having courage, taking initiative, taking, leading the charge, leading the way, those kinds of things. And on a very sort of base level, it can be good to do physical things with all this Mars energy going on, because it's a good way to discharge the energy, right? If you're not doing it in any other constructive rather than destructive way. So, but getting back to Eris and Lilith, which are actually, like, Mars is kind of sandwiched in between these two female archetypes, right? Lilith is thought to be, some people talk about Lilith as being more the lower octave of Eris, meaning that Eris speaks to the more collective experience and Lilith more to the personal experience, right? The wild feminine, like these things I was talking about. And in mythology, Lilith was the first wife of Adam, who would not, what's the word I'm looking for? Here's my brain fog going on right now. But she wouldn't submit is the word I'm looking for. She would not submit to Adam, and he didn't like that, and so she left. And basically, and then he married Eve, right? So that's the very short version. But it's like I see this Lilith energy, and Eris to a degree, as the parts of the feminine that really have been dismissed by the patriarchy, that have been kind of damned to hell, if you will. The patriarchy has tried to kind of repress these parts of the feminine that don't fit in the tight little box that can be, controlled and that sort of thing. And so, but Lilith says, and Eris, like, I'm not going to go quietly. And and Lilith is like, you're going to kind of pay for what you've done, because it's natural law that all wrongs must be righted, that sort of thing, right? So anyway, and incidentally, when Eris was first discovered, the dwarf planet Eris was nicknamed Xena, right? I don't know if you remember that character, Xena, warrior princess, and she was. There was a show where Xena, was this huge sort of Amazonian woman, and with a bit of a dark past, but she redeemed herself by helping people, with her really stellar, battle skills kind of thing. So that's the Eris energy, right? So I think it's interesting because we're seeing this play out in the collective, right? It's not only the masculine warrior energy and the warlike energy of Mars. We're seeing that balanced with the feminine archetype, right, of the warrior as well. So interesting stuff, and it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out over time. Last thing I want to say before I run through the signs here is that just before the full moon, Venus, which will be in Leo at the time, is going to trine Mars, right? Mars retrograde in Aries. So that's a bit of a bright spot. That's a bit of a silver lining. That's a bit of a gift, if you will, because the trine is supportive, right? So Venus is there lending us a little bit of a softer touch. And then Venus is going to move on Saturday, October 3rd. Venus is going to move into Virgo until the 27th. And so just in, like a one-liner sort of thing, Venus in Virgo, it's kind of the gift of focusing, on, or devoting, Virgo, ourselves to something that brings us pleasure, something that we value, something that we love, someone that we love, that sort of thing, right? Venus in Virgo, and Venus in Virgo is more, she's subtle, right? She's not the showy sort of attention-seeking Venus in Leo. She's much more sort of subdued and practical, and that kind of thing. So that's what's going on there. What we're going to do now is we're going to run through each sign and speak to where the full moon is happening, what area of the chart it's happening in for you, what house, which whole sign house, when we're talking in these general forecasts. And we're talking first and foremost to rising sign, but also listen for your sun and moon for added layers of info. And keep in mind that anybody that has planets or triggery points around in the first 20 degrees of the cardinal signs are being triggered, and the closer that is to 9 degrees, the more exact it is. But really triggered by this full moon more than others. And the cardinal signs, again, are Aries, Cancer, Leo, Capricorn. But then, of course, like I already said to you, that the cardinal signs in general are really, under some intense scrutiny this year in general. So let's begin. And also, just to remind you, think back to around March 24th. What happened around then? What was initiated in relation to these life themes that I'm going to speak to you about, because that was the new moon in Aries. This is the culmination point of that, right? The full moon in Aries. So speaking of Aries, you're first, right? Because this is your full moon. So something that began for you at the time of your new moon in relation to you, yourself, your physical health and vitality, and how you project yourself out into the world, how the world perceives you, that sort of thing, is reaching a culmination point, a crescendo around the time of this full moon. So that's where it's triggering for you. And the next Taurus, the full moon is triggering your 12th house, right? Which is a very hidden house. It has to do with endings and releasing and things that go on behind closed doors, and how you spend time in rest and recovery and that sort of thing. It has to do with the unseen things, the spiritual realm. And sometimes it has to do with how we sabotage ourselves, right? Bad habits, addictions, that sort of thing. But it's sort of this house, ruled by Pisces, and it sort of speaks to the more, it's this axis of order and chaos, right? Order being the opposite end of the spectrum with Virgo, but the 12th house is more, the chaos piece kind of thing. And so for you, Taurus, that 12th house, those 12th house themes are being triggered by this full moon, right? And reaching some kind of a climax point. Next, we've got Gemini, where the full moon is reaching a crescendo in your 11th house, Gemini. And so this has to do with the group, right? In general, like friendship groups, networks, that could be online as well, these days in particular, but clubs, associations, that sort of thing. Also the people that you might consider benefactors, or people that are walking the same path as you, can help you reach your goals and dreams for the future. Because 11th house is also about that vision for the future that we have. And so what we're reaching for. And so for you, Gemini, that's what's, something that started around the end of March there, around the 24th at the time of that new moon, is reaching a climax point now in relation to those themes. Next, we've got Cancer. Cancer for you, the 10th house is where the full moon is culminating, right? And so for you, that is triggering issues around your public reputation and persona, your status, your career, your relationship to authority and authority figures, sometimes like more father figures, also legacy, right? Legacy you wish to leave. And so that is, something that started around the end of March is now reaching this culmination point, this peak moment here at the time of the full moon. Next, we've got Leo. Leo, the full moon is triggering your 9th house this month. And so for you, that speaks to themes around higher education and higher learning. So things, beyond sort of early learning environments and things we learn, in early school, but also having to do with things, it can have to do with publishing, getting your message out there, but very much about your worldview and your belief system and, the search for meaning in general. It can have to do with foreign people and places as well. So that's where the full moon is culminating for you, Leo. And, that will be in relation to whatever began in late March in the same area of your chart at the new moon there. Okay, next we've got Virgo. Sorry, Virgo. Almost forgot myself. I'm a Virgo rising. So Virgo, for you, the full moon is culminating in the 8th house. And, it's this area of life that has to do with a few complicated things. Like it's your entanglement with other people. It is the resources that you share with other people. It has to do with themes, death, transformation, intimacy, like I said, other people's money, that sort of thing. Very much also about things that are beyond our control. And so this is where the full moon is culminating for you. And it's related to something that transpired or was initiated in late March, around the time of the new moon in Aries. And so you'll find something's reaching a crescendo point now. And it may be a bit touchy with the Chiron piece there and bringing up some old wounds around these themes. So that's for you, Virgo. Next, we've got Libra. Libra, for you, the full moon is reaching a climax point in your 7th house of one-to-one relationships. So, this can be marriage partners, significant others, business partners, close friends and family members, rivals. It can be also have to do with contracts and agreements, 7th house. So something that was initiated around the new moon at the end of March 24th, is now reaching a culmination point, right? A full moon moment, if you will. And so, and then there's the Chiron piece and the other pieces that I talked about in the introduction to be mindful of there. So that's for you, Libra. Next, we've got Scorpio, where we have the full moon culminating in your 6th house. And so for you, Scorpio, this is related to your daily routine, the daily grind, checking off the ticky boxes, how you sort of organize and order things. It's a routines around health and wellness and issues around health and illness and how you are in service. Pets also factor into this house, these themes as well. So these are, this is what's culminating here around the time of this. And it can also have to do with like subordinate relationships, like employee-employer relationships, that kind of thing. And so, something was initiated around the time of that new moon in late March, and now it's reaching this crescendo point in relation to the sixth house themes. Next, we've got Sagittarius. For you, Sagittarius, this is this full moon moment is in your fifth house, right? And that's the house that speaks to themes around children, your creativity, creative projects, what sparks joy for you, anything that brings you pleasure. And so something began around late March for you in relation to these themes. And now it's reaching this climax, this crisis point, this release, letting go, all those full moon words, right? In relation, to those themes. So next we've got Capricorn. Capricorn, for you, the full moon in Aries is reaching a crescendo in your fourth house. So the fourth house speaks to themes of home, family, roots, ancestry, place of living, real estate, mothering, nurturing sort of feminine figures, that sort of thing, and emotional security. And so this is related to something that was initiated back in late March, and now it's reaching this full bloom, right? This full moon moment, this catharsis, maybe, that kind of thing. So that's for you, Capricorn. And for next, we've got Aquarius. Sorry, Aquarius, for you, this full moon is reaching a climax in your third house. That has to do with a few different themes. It has to do with communications, but it has to do more with like your immediate environment and the people in it. Like it can be neighborhood, community, siblings, cousins, teammates, peers, the people you interact with on the day-to-day. Messages exchanged back and forth. It can have to do with commerce and marketing, mobility, short distance travel. These are all third house themes. So something that sort of was initiated in late March around the time of the new moon in Aries is now reaching this crescendo in relation to these themes for you, Aquarius. Next, we've got Pisces. Pisces, for you, and last but not least in this case, the full moon is reaching its crescendo in your second house of your personal resources, your money, your personal finances, time, energy, what you value, your sense of self-worth. These are all themes being triggered by this full moon. And something was initiated at the new moon in late March regarding these same themes and is now reaching a culmination point. And it may trigger, as I mentioned in the intro, because of the Chiron piece, some old wounds resurfacing, right? That need to be kind of dealt with, released, that sort of thing. So that's all 12 signs. And I hope this was helpful to you. And, keep breathing, get rest as much as you can, all of those things. Take good care of yourself. And, join me on Facebook and Instagram if you want more regular kind of updates and communication, and I will see you next week. Okay, take good care. Bye-bye.